so cool to think about. Like, I can picture this guy in this little Japanese apartment with these two actors squirting blood everywhere, covering stuff with tinfoil, making a giant spinning mechanical. Hey everybody, my name is Nick. I'm a director and editor living in Taiwan, and today I'm going to be talking about the totally insane cyberpunk film Tetsuo the Iron Man. So Tetsuo the Iron Man is a pretty crazy movie. It's more like an experimental film than a film with a plot, although it does sort of have a plot. The movie is about a man that's infected by metal, and it slowly takes over his body, and he becomes this destructive, sadistic Iron Man who attacks his girlfriend and then ends up having a conflict with the creature or person that turned him into this Iron Man. Explaining it like that is like way more of a plot description than I think you could get out of the movie by watching it, because really what it is a series of images that kind of cohesively come to tell this story, but the construction of it is not like a linear film that you would expect. What's kind of funny is that normally I don't typically feel like spoilers are that big of a deal. I think knowing what happens in a story isn't really the point of a film's experience. But with an experimental kind of crazy movie like this, I find that when I read the plot description on Wikipedia or other people's description of what's happening in the film, it actually was a little bit of a spoiler because it put an interpretation on the events. I think me explaining to you all the beats of the plot in this movie kind of take a little bit of the fun out of it, because figuring out what's going on, what the kind of juxtaposition of images in this movie mean, is part of the fun. And I wish I hadn't read a plot description before watching it, because I think it kind of imprinted on my brain what was happening when I would have liked to have kind of discovered that on my own. But that's just me. I like figuring out weird stuff that I don't know what it means, but I know a lot of people like to kind of know what is supposed to be going on. So if that's you, you can read the plot description. But if you want to watch something crazy and kind of let it wash over you and be like, what is happening? Like, what is going on? Then I would recommend watching it cold and not reading a plot. There's a pretty cool reveal actually in this that I wish I hadn't known about, that happens, that if you read the Wikipedia plot description spoils the movie right away. This movie is very interesting because, according to Wikipedia, which I told you not to read, it says that this is the film that is responsible for kind of putting Japanese cinema back in the film festival circuit. It was very popular among foreign audiences when it was released, kind of like a cult hit. And it's kind of fun to think that this is the crazy ass movie that allowed for something like the very subtle and very reserved Drive My Car to be nominated for an Oscar so many years later. Japanese cinema among foreign circles is built on a foundation of this crazy, offensive, wild, blood splatter movie, which is pretty damn cool. And I actually think it speaks to the way that kind of film movements work, where genre films like this one are the back on which art cinema is built. Because genre can experiment and do wild, crazy things that appeals to arty people like me, but it also can, because it's crazy and fun and revelatory, wider audiences can appreciate it as well. So what's so cool about this movie? Why do I like this movie? Well, for me, as an editor, the crazy non-linear kind of editing style, all these weird non-diegetic cuts are just so fun and cool to watch. Just inspired me as an editor while I was watching it, just like the way that they would just do a scene and like cut out all the fat. Like everything moves super fast, and all of a sudden you're in different places, and you add in weird elements and jump around. Somebody will be doing something very tense, and then all of a sudden there's a quick cut to the sky, and you see the sky, and there's this small, very brief, maybe second moment of peace before we cut back into this crazy action. They do cool techniques with a TV, kind of blurry TV footage that in a way sort of mimics the memory of a machine, which is what this film is kind of trying to show us, that this man is being infected by metal, and this is almost like we tapped into his brain with a plug, and we're just getting this bombardment of insane images about how this guy became infected, like what's going on in this crazed mind of him. We're living in the brain of this crazy mechanized human. We're not in reality anymore in this film. You know, we cut through space and time blasting around like we are a computer that's downloading information. And that's the theme of this film, is like the mechanization of humans, right? So the style of the film mimics kind of what's happening in the characters of the film. This is a very low budget film, but they use a lot of great techniques to kind of make that low budgetness work for it. Great editing, as I mentioned, but they also have good framing where they frame in exactly what they want you to see to mask the fact that these effects are not so sophisticated, but they are very visceral because of the way that they're shot. The very beginning of the film, the guy stabs his leg with a knife and the blood splurts out of his hand. It's a very simple effect. You know, you can think about it for 3 seconds and think about how they did it, but the way they shot it, the framing, the placement of the camera, you feel the visceral effects of this. I can feel the feeling of being stabbed in the leg when I watch it. Black and white is obviously a tool that has been used for years and years for the low budget filmmaker to mask certain things. For example, you don't have to worry about color blending with sunlight and film lights. And it can cover up, I'm sure, like costume colors where you can do more interesting things with the metal. They have a lot of metal and twisting, and it can be all about the texture rather than worrying about like, oh, what's the color of these different wires? And it just takes an element out so that you can be more focused on the things that you're actually using in the frame. So using black and white obviously is an excellent technique for people that are trying to save money, but also want to make something that is highly meticulous, like this film is. It, despite being low budget, is very meticulous. All of the textures and the way that the metal is wrapped around him is it's wild and meticulous, which is so cool about this film. Like, there's a lot of effort and energy you can see, but it's also crazy. The sound design in this film is top of the line. It's so good. The way that they use these heavy industrial clanks and metal noises is so fun and cool, and they do it in big ways. Like in the beginning, like a guy rakes a bolt through his teeth and you hear that clink, 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 clink of the bolt going through his teeth. So this is this very kind of ostentatious use of sound design, which is very visceral. And when at the very beginning when it happens, like I was grinding my teeth, I can feel it going through. They have a lot of sounds like that where you can actually feel the grinding and feel the whooshing and like feel it inserting into your flesh. Like the sound is very impactful in that way where it affects you and you feel like, oh my gosh, I feel like metal is being inserted into me. And then they do it subtly too. They have these subtle noises in the film. Like in the very beginning, a guy just knocks a metal hanger and you hear the little clink of the metal hanger that he knocks. That's a very subtle sound that maybe, you know, could have been lost in the mix, but it's there. You can hear that little clink. You can hear the little pad of the footsteps of the people around the house. So attention to the big pictured visceral details, but also the little tiny little details of the sound as well. The music is cool and amazing, you know, industrial techno kind of stuff that like plods through. I was so hyped at the end of the film listening to the final credits song. I was nodding my head just watching the full credits of this film as it ended because the music is so good and fun to listen to on its own. So all of the technical elements and what you can learn from this film as like somebody who likes weird genre movies is all there. Like that part of it, I think, is the reason why this film has endured for so long. Story-wise, I mean, it's not super amazing. Like when you watch it and you hear the story, there's not that much to it really that is groundbreaking or fantastic. The part of it that spoke to me was a lot of the body horror stuff, like the idea of a guy morphing into metal and kind of the contrast of the organic and the metallic, the feelings that it makes you feel when you watch, you know, metal getting inserted into flesh and people cutting, and like there's something very affecting about that I really like as a horror aficionado and a body horror aficionado in particular. For me, when that portion of the film kind of transitioned from the body horror, him turning into the metal man, into this like fight sequence, this battle sequence that happens at the end of the film, I kind of lost a little bit of interest. I thought that the battle between the two Iron Men was a little repetitive. I feel like it moves from body horror, which is something I like, to an anime fight, which is cool, but it's not really something that speaks to me on a deeper level. And I think it's something that, interestingly enough, is probably the most influential part of this film, where I think a lot of anime and anime fights and the way that we think visually about anime fight scenes or or even like two superhero people fighting. I can see a lot of influence in anime, so I think that's probably a very influential part of this film, but it's actually the least interesting, maybe because I've seen it so often now. Throughout, as you watch and you kind of follow this just like grinding, crunching, and all this stuff, it does retain its interest. But story-wise, I think definitely the stronger portion is the first half, him turning into the Iron Man. That spoke to me, and I think there's a lot of more human elements and kind of interesting themes to explore in that part of the film. What are those themes that we want to explore? What is the meaning of this film? Well, I mean, quite obviously, as you watch it, it's about how the industrial and mechanical and computerized world kind of dehumanizes us and is taking us over. More important than that, I think, is not even the meaning of exactly what the film is saying, but the spirit in which this film was made. So this is a cyberpunk film. It's truly cyberpunk in that punk, for me, is about like destruction and mess and mocking the system and showing off all these crazy taboos and just being wild and just kind of doing what you feel and think and just craziness. And it's mixing that with this futuristic elements. So this is a true cyberpunk thing. It kind of pisses me off that now cyberpunk is associated with this like stupid like aesthetic of like bright glowing neon lights. That is kind of like the manicured new commercialized friendly version of this. Punk needs to be messy and crazy and totally insane. Like the most cyberpunk thing about that stupid game Cyberpunk is when the programming wasn't finished and people played it and it was all fucked up and nothing worked and people would drop through the floor and stuff. That's cyberpunk. It's not cyberpunk because somebody has like pink hair and they drive a hover car. Like this idea of crashing through everything and just having everything be messy and crazy. I think what's so important about that is that there's a real human element to the messiness of this film and the messiness of that punk aesthetic. Mocking things, doing things that you shouldn't do, making things crazy, like the flaws even in the filmmaking, like a hair in the gate of the film, kind of not so perfect framing, like the wild way that it's done. This is a very human way of making a film. And AI, with this AI art that we're seeing and this computerized, very clean aesthetic that is becoming so common all around us, takes us so far away from our humanity in a way that this film does not. You know, I really think that a lot of what this film is doing in showing this person becoming a machine is it's helping us retain our humanity. You know, this AI art that's so perfect and clean and whatever, it takes that away from us. And the parts of AI that are interesting to me and are humanizing to me are when it's messed up and screwed up, like when it makes the weird hands. That's like the human part of it. That's the interesting part of it. It's not interesting to me when people continually kind of create this similar stuff by just inputting what they want. Like, I know there was a trend recently where they were like, oh, if Star Wars was Wes Anderson or if blah blah was Wes Anderson, and the AI automatically makes it, and you watch it once and you think that's kind of interesting, but then the more you see these kind of things, you just think like this is just like a cookie cutter cut and paste kind of thing. I think the thing that is really troubling about AI art is that it takes the effort out of it. Everything is instantaneous. We want to see, oh, what does Star Wars Wes Anderson look like? We get it in 3 seconds. It's all made for us. There's no effort, there's no energy. We want to keep that effort and that energy. Like with this movie, Tetsuo the Iron Man, we see the seams on the effects. We know how they're kind of done. But it's so cool to think about, like, I can picture this guy in this little Japanese apartment with these two actors squirting blood everywhere, covering stuff with tinfoil, you know, making a giant spinning mechanical dick and figuring out how it's gonna spin around and how he's gonna shoot it so that he doesn't actually hurt anybody, but blood splatters. Like all this stuff, I feel the humanity in the making of this film, of all of the metal everywhere, kind of wrapping somebody in this stuff, like the visceral feeling of it. That's what's important, and that's what's so great about a movie like this. Why aren't movies like they used to be? Well, we need to keep that element of handcraftedness. We want to be able to see the effort put into the work that is being shown to us. If everything is so easy to make, like these crappy effects that we just, you know, put up, whether or not you're using whatever technique or element, you know, even if you're using AI to augment your work, what we want to see as audience members, or what I want to see personally as an artist watching films, is I want to see the effort and the thought and the energy and the personality of the creator. I don't want to see something that is cookie cutter and copy pasted. And Tetsuo the Iron Man is certainly not that. It is very unique, and there's a lot of effort and energy keyword, this movie that is put into it. So it's a great movie to watch. It's an inspiring movie to watch, even though it's not perfect. It's pretty offensive. If you're squeamish, and obviously don't watch this movie, but definitely a killer movie, very punk rock. Recommendations of films: if you like Tetsuo the Iron Man, other movies you could check out would be obviously anything by Cronenberg, The Fly, Dead Ringers is a personal favorite of mine. The movie Brain Dead, Dead Alive has a lot of similarities. That's Peter Jackson's, one of his earlier films. Also, of course, George Romero's early work, Day of the Dead is a great movie to watch. That, it's more plot driven than that. If you want something crazy experimental like this, Eraserhead, David Lynch. Or there's a weird movie called Begotten that has a lot of similarity to this. It's black and white and it's freaking weird as hell. So yeah, check those movies out. Remember to like, share, subscribe, tell your friends as you do, and make something weird. If you have some weird art stuff that you made that's crazy, let me know in the comments. I'll be happy to check it out. All right, see you guys next time.